Wonderful. My name is Ian Harton from Genos International. I'm absolutely delighted to be partnering with the Malaysian Institute of Management for this webinar this afternoon for you. I can see we've now got over 100 people have joined us, which is a fantastic response.
Right. Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for joining this weekly webinar sessions of MIM. I'm Siva, the CEO for the Malaysian Institute of Management, and I'll be moderating this session together with Ian. How many we have, Ian?
118, Siva, at the moment.
So maybe we'll give them about 30 seconds before we take off.
Yeah, it's still another minute to go before 4 o'clock. Sometimes people do tend to join on the dot of the hour, which is good, very time efficient.
Mm-hmm. So how have you been guys doing? And this is our 44th day, I should say, into the MCO. And for those of you who have been working from home, I think many of you have been saying that it has been long hours and you have been putting more hours into your job than ever before. So maybe you want to type some comments into the chat box and say, so what's it like working from home? And perhaps you want to share one word that describes it.
Yeah, that would be great. The chat box is in your control panel. Feel free to make yourself familiar with that feature. That'll be very useful throughout the webinar that I'll be running for you. And we'll start reading out some of those words as they come through. What are you noticing coming through so far, Siva?
I have 137 participants. I've not seen any chats here.
Okay.
Just.
No, 22.
All right, I'm seeing that now.
Yeah, good. Okay, thanks.
Manageable from home. Good afternoon. Internet connection has to be. Yeah, connection can be a pain at times. Yes. I have one colleague of mine, she has got 2 adult kids, and the husband, all 4 of them are sharing the internet at home, and they all are fighting for the broadband space.
Yeah, how are your internet speeds in Malaysia? Do you have good speed internet?
Generally good, but then depends on the location.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Some of us unaware and not ready for working from home.
Great.
Yeah, very can relate to that strongly.
Easy to communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're up to 160 people have joined us.
Yeah, 161.
Yeah, great.
For those of you who have joined just recently, it's me, Shiva, here, together with Ian Hamilton from Genos International. So we have just asked you to put into the chat box to just let us know how have you been doing, especially during the MCO, and perhaps that you may want to share one word that describes best.
Fantastic. And Shiva, just let me know when you would like me to commence the webinar. I think.
Okay, Ben, I think people will be joining in. Let's start. I think we have got more than 180 who are here today.
Yeah.
So I will just do the introduction. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us in this weekly webinar series of MIM. I'm Siva here, the CEO of the Malaysian Institute of Management, and I shall be your moderator for today's session. MIM has launched the weekly webinar sessions for our members, and this is now open to the public. And if you want to know more about our webinar series, please go on to our website and check it out at www.mim.org.my. Now, today's session is brought to you exclusively in our partnership with Genos International and also in collaboration with the Konrad Adnia Stiftung organization, and is also extended to the members of ACCA who are also our supporting partner. And for those who are members of ACCA, just to inform you that if you have joined this session and you stay on for the full 1 hour, you are eligible for 1 CPD points. So what is it like? What is it like working from home? I think it has been quite tough for many, especially now that we have moved into the almost 44th day of the MCO. Now, today we have close to about 400 participants who have registered. I think now we have got almost 200 have come on board. Yeah. And this session offers tips and techniques for you to thrive when working remotely. So please allow me to introduce the speaker for today. There is Ian Hamilton. Ian has a background in learning and development. He has spent his career in learning specialization of the Royal Air Force in UK and in a variety of commercial learning and human resources roles in Australia. He has had a variety of leadership roles, including a secondment to Buckingham Palace and an appointment with NATO. Currently, Ian facilitates the GNOS certification program and delivers development programs for GNOS across their suite of assessment and development products. Ian is an experienced consultant, facilitator, and program designer who has worked across a variety of industries, including defense, FMCG, hospitality, financial services, and many more. Ian is an experienced coach, speaker, trainer, designer, and he is also accredited in the following psychometric instruments, that is GNOS Emotional Intelligence, Urban Brain Dominance Instrument, in short HBDI, and Myers-Briggs Type Indicator MBTI. Ian holds a master's degree in the field of training and education from the University of Bath. Over to you, Ben.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much. And I'm absolutely delighted to be invited to speak to you today. I'm coming from Australia, where GNOS International are based. And like you, we are currently all working from home. So I think it's only those people in critical roles, such as in health, are actually in their workplaces. The vast majority of the Australian population are just like you, working from home. And I think that gives me the opportunity to talk to you firsthand about what our experiences are like, and to engage you in a conversation about some of the things we can all do, tips and techniques, if you like, to thrive in this working environment. Before I start the webinar, though, I'd like to say that today is about offering you some ideas. There isn't a formula that I can give you that's going to help you work from home, because every one of us has a unique working situation. Some of us will be sharing our homes with children and family. Other of us may be on our own. So it's very much about trying to give you some ideas and give you some thought-provoking tips and techniques that you can use to try and maximize your productivity at home. Now, a little bit of housekeeping. We've deliberately placed your microphones on mute. That's not because we don't want to hear from you. We absolutely do want to hear from you. But the way to do that is through the chat box. And that's why Siva is going to be moderating for me. He'll keep an eye on the chat, and so will I, as we go through the webinar. And we will stop at regular intervals to read out some of the comments that you're making. The reason your microphones are on mute is that noise can be very distracting, and we really want you to have a very clear learning experience. As I've said already, I'm facilitating the program, and Siva is very kindly offered to act as my moderator. It's very hard to do both jobs. A recording of the session will be made available for those who are unable to attend the live event, and thank you very much for coming. So just first and very quickly, who are GNOS International? If you've not come across our organisation before, we are an Australian-based organisation that work in the field of the assessment and development of emotional intelligence. We operate across 33 different countries in the world, and we offer a range of different assessment tools to assist coaches and learning development specialists and people in HR support people develop their emotionally intelligent workplace behaviour. And as you can see from my slide, we're the very proud recipients of the training or assessment and training industry awards and a Brandon Hall Excellence Award as well. And if you'd like to know more about us, please feel free to visit our website. Okay, let's take a look at what I'm going to cover during the course of this webinar today. First of all, I'm going to do some positioning. So I'm going to talk about what does the research tell us about working from home. And I'm going to draw from some very current research, but it was pre-COVID-19, pre-pandemic. And so it's really interesting to see what do the experts tell us about working from home and how similar or different is that to our current experiences. I'm then going to invite you to talk about some of the challenges you're facing in working from home. This is going to be an interactive webinar. We'd love to hear from you, so keep typing away. Let's keep Siva really busy during the next hour with your comments, and we'll stop periodically to feed those back to you. The other thing I'm going to do is offer you a range of tips, tools, and techniques to help you thrive in this environment. There are things we can do, scientific things we can do that can help us get the best out of this working from home environment. So let's have a look at what they might be. And if you've got some great ideas yourself, if you've discovered some things that work for you, we'd be delighted for you to share them amongst the group. And I'm also going to share with you at the end of the webinar a very simple technique that will help you evaluate, make sense of, look at the merit and worth of some of the things you're doing. So if you've decided to do something new, how do you determine whether it's working or not? And we'll look at that as well. And finally, because this webinar is all about action and doing things differently, I'll encourage you at the very end to let us know what are the tips and techniques you think you might work on over the next few weeks to try and make your working from home experience as productive as possible. Okay, let's get started. So this is the GENOS model of emotional intelligence. And whilst this webinar is not about emotional intelligence, working from home does heavily lean on one of the competencies of the GENOS model, and that is self-awareness. So when we work from home, it's really important to understand the influence that factors are having upon the way we feel. So for example, if we're getting frustrated by, and this is something that came through the chat earlier, the speed of our internet connection, and it's making us feel frustrated or annoyed that we can't do the things we would normally do in the office. It's very important to be present with that emotion. We describe that as someone who's self-aware is they understand the cause of their emotion. And so when we're working from home, it's really important to be able to determine what are the triggers for me to feel different ways. What we're trying to avoid, of course, is this sense of feeling slightly disconnected, frustrated and agitated, but not quite sure why. And so during the course of the webinar, I will touch on this concept of self-awareness fairly regularly, giving you the opportunity to step back and reflect and think, have I got things right? Is my working from home environment as good as it can be? And if not, what things do I need to change? How self-aware am I of the small things I might need to do differently? So let's start with the research. Now, interestingly, in late 2019, pre-COVID-19, a research study was conducted where 2,500 people were invited to comment on a series of questions. And the research was conducted by a brand agency called Buffer. And I've put the link to the research in the handout and the workbook that goes with this webinar. And what was really interesting about this study was that the overwhelming majority of people surveyed, in fact, 99%, so you could pretty much say it was everybody, responded positively to the idea that they would like to work from home for at least part of their role. That's really significant, I think. So if you take yourself back 6 months and someone had asked you, would you like to work from home for 1 or 2 days, at least a week? How do you think you would have responded? Certainly, I think I would have said yes, because there are many, many attractions to working from home. Number one, you save all that time on the commute to and from work every day. You may have time to do some household chores that you'd normally have to do when you get home in the evening. You've got the comfort of your own kitchen and your fridge and all the things that are comfortable in your own home. The other, though, really interesting feature of this study was that under 5% of people who actually were surveyed had had that experience. So even though the overwhelming majority of us have said, yes, I'd like to do it, a tiny percentage of us have actually had the experience. And so let's project ahead 6 months. Where are we today? Well, certainly in Malaysia and in Australia and in New Zealand and in the United Kingdom and many other countries around the world, with very, very little preparation, we are all now suddenly working from home. And of course, we've had very little time to plan, very little time to make the arrangements we need to make that as conducive for us to be as productive as possible. And so I think it's a really interesting piece of research that sort of lays the background, the context behind the webinar today. Okay, so what are the challenges around working from home? Well, working from home creates a range of distractions, and we're going to investigate those later. But the way we feel hour to hour, minute to minute does influence us quite significantly. And many of the emotions that we're experiencing at home are not emotions we experience in the workplace. The frustration around internet, the background noise that we don't get in the office are things that will influence our emotions, both productively and unproductively. And of course, being self-aware allows us to recognize that these emotions, through working from home, sharing our home workspace with others perhaps, influences the quality of our decision making. It influences our visible behavior, the things we say, the things we do, and almost certainly influences our productivity. This is one of the most well understood aspects of social science, that the way we feel influences these three important aspects of ourselves. And of course, in the office, we have far more control over these things than we do at home. And so part of the webinar today is really designed to get you thinking about, what is my current experience like working from home? And how are the things that I'm dealing with influencing my decision-making, my behavior, and my productivity? So this is an interactive webinar, and we'd love to hear from you at this point. And this is where I'd like you to type into the chat box, what are the challenges that you're facing when working from home? And I'm using that abbreviation WFH to stand for working from home. Your chat box is in the control panel. Please type away. We'd love to hear your comments, and I'll invite Siva in a moment to just offer some of his own perspectives on what are the things he's noticing coming through the chat box. And I've got my eye on that too, and I can see some very interesting comments coming through. So let's see what your unique challenges are. So Siva, perhaps I could hand over to you at this point.
Yeah, so some have put it into the Q&A, but I'll just pick up one from CN Wong. It says, demands from other family members. That becomes very prominent. And someone has said that they're getting stressed up.
Yeah.
And people are learning how to manage. Working from home is tiring. Yes, it can be tiring because many have not been used to working from home, and it's for the first time. Everybody is pushed to working from home, and it can be long hours, right? And there is also cultivating new habits and skills. Let's see what are the new ones. These were the earlier comments. Disturb family members, loss of focus, having to stand by almost 24 hours all day, right? Internet connections and juggling for house and house chores. Yeah, this is something, I really empathize with the women folk, because when they're back home, not only they have to work, they have to cook for the spouse, they have to make sure the children are taken care, they have to wash the clothes, they have to do so many other things. So it becomes very challenging for the women folk.
Yeah.
Just hold on there.
Yeah. And so I can see here people saying working 24/7. It's yeah, I'm going to come to that in a moment. Yeah, often we work longer hours when we work from home because work is so accessible.
And this is Farhana. It says my husband is working, about 800 kilometers away. I have to take care of my 6-year-old and 2-year-old babies on my own.
Yeah.
Somebody.
Oh, sorry. So you continue.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you so much for offering up your own experiences. This is such valuable information. And of course, I think what's apparent, what's obvious from looking at these comments is that working from home isn't easy. In fact, it's very, very tiring. It's a new discipline. It's a new skill we need to develop. So what I'd like to do now then is let's have a look at what the research says. So back 6 months ago, when 2,500 people across the world were surveyed, what did they say were the challenges? And let's see how closely they align to the things that you have identified. And I can continue to see through the chat panel, you're continuing to type away. So number one, unplugging. So what does that mean? Well, it describes the challenge of separating work and life outside of work. Now, for many of us, when you go to an office, when you leave the office, you're in a routine of getting in your car or getting onto transport, depending on whether you're working in a city or somewhere remote. And there's a separation. You drive home and then you can reconnect with your life outside of work. What many people report is when they work from home, work never goes away. The laptop is always visible. Your paperwork is always accessible. And very quickly, it can become quite habit forming to go back to work at unusual hours of the day. And so when you work from home, often people do describe work and home becoming one entity. There's a single thing now where I spend all of my time. And so unplugging is something I'm going to talk about during the course of this webinar. Number two, loneliness. Many people report a sense of isolation. The office is a sense of community. It brings people together. It creates social networks. When that's broken and disrupted, we shouldn't be surprised that many of us are feeling a sense of loneliness. That can be an experience that you find, even if you've got a house full of family members, because you've broken the tie with your work colleagues and with your manager. And if you're somebody like me who trains other people, you've broken the tie with your students and the very clients you work with. So loneliness is another factor that was identified. Number 3, I've noticed through the chat box, many of you have talked about the challenge of communication. Everything now has to be virtual. Running this webinar is more exhausting than standing and talking to a group of people, because there's a lot of different skills that you need. Looking at the control panel, managing the environment around your computer. But we also know that virtual meetings can be very tiring, as too can be spending a long time on your mobile phone. I've got my phone with me and it's turned off at the moment, but I've had to recharge my phone during the day because I've been on it so much. And that's a very early piece of feedback to me, but that would never normally happen. I'd be doing a lot more one-to-one, face-to-face communication. Another one, distractions. The home is full of distractions. Now in the office, many of these distractions have been managed and moved and removed for you, or you've removed them. But when you're working from home, you've got a brand new set of distractions. We'll talk about those later, but they could be things as simple as the noise of your neighbour. And I saw someone post that earlier. It could be sharing your workspace with family members because you're in lockdown. It could be your pets are distracting and noisy. It could be your neighbours, the people you live close by could be very noisy. All of these things are things that we may not necessarily encounter in the workplace. And then finally, for many of us, it's keeping focused. I saw that comment coming through from a couple of people. Staying motivated when you don't have people around you who keep you focused is a big challenge, particularly if you're working longer hours than you would normally. So the challenge of maintaining your focus are very, very significant when you're working from home. So these are the big 5 items. Now, what I would like to do is hear from you. Which of those 5 are significant for you? Is this research what you're currently experiencing? So I'm going to launch a poll. I'd love you to vote on these for us. You can tick as many as you like. As soon as all the votes are cast, I'll show you the results and I'll bring Siva in and we can talk about some of the findings. So I've launched that poll. That should be coming up on your screen. If Siva, if you could let me know if you could see that, that'd be great.
Yeah, they can see that.
Yeah, great. And I can see people are voting already. So already we've had 20 votes cast. We're up to 10%. So which of these are a challenge for you? We'd love to hear from you. The beauty of this isn't research that you can pull off the internet. This is live in the moment data that's highly relevant to the Malaysian context. What are you experiencing at the moment when you're working from home? So we're over halfway. Siva, I'll let you know when the poll is complete.
Sure.
I'm getting an early glimpse of the results and they are interesting. Okay, 70%.
There is also an interesting comment. It's a combination of work from home plus school from home.
Absolutely, which is why the survey is only relevant pre-pandemic. And we're currently experiencing quite different conditions, which is why this poll, I think, was even more accurate than what I was talking about earlier. So 80% of you have voted. I'll just give you another 30 seconds. If anyone would like to cast a vote, now's your chance. And I'll close the poll and I'll share the results. So over 80%. So I'm just going to close that now. You've just got a final chance to vote. Wonderful. So I'm going to end that poll and I'm going to share those results. Siva, again, if you could let me know if you can see the results.
Yes, we can see the results.
Wonderful. Now, because you're in Malaysia and I'm in Australia, I think I'm best placed to hand over to you now just to see what context you can place against some of these results. You know, what are you noticing and what chat's coming through in the chat box as well?
I think I find many of those comments are purely distractions.
Yeah.
Right, a lot of distractions. And then, with the family, the kids, parents, husbands, and also monitoring teams. There seems to be no boundary,
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Boundaries are something I'll talk about during the webinar, but yeah, the separation between work and home has disappeared for many of us. I'm running this webinar for you now, which is nearly 5 o'clock in Australia. I've had to tell my family to be quiet for an hour because they're all sharing a home with me. A very unique set of challenges. What else are we noticing here? Well, certainly the challenge of staying motivated is high, 47%. And of course, we're only a few weeks into this working from home environment. For many of us, this could be an environment we're in for a lot longer yet. The other one I've noticed that's interesting is loneliness coming out quite low. I wonder, Siva, whether that's because we're sharing our homes with other people at this stage and we're not working on our own during the day.
Yes, perhaps, and also the loneliness could be coming, especially for some of them who are not with their family, and they're working or they've stayed away from the family and they are confined to their apartments, perhaps.
I've just seen a comment from Peggy there saying Malaysians always stay with families. So that's a difference to Australia. So this loneliness may well be something that came out in the research, but doesn't necessarily reflect your experience in Malaysia. But I think what we can see from the survey is that staying motivated, communicating virtually, managing distractions, putting a healthy balance between life inside and outside of work, and loneliness are all big factors that we all need to work on. So let me stop sharing that poll now and continue with the webinar. Okay, so let's talk about some tools, tips and techniques that can help us manage these 5 big challenges. So when we talk about unplugging, one of the great opportunities that we all have, and it's a word that I've seen come up in the chat box already, is create boundaries. Even the concept of a boundary is a very useful one for us all to consider. So what do I mean by a boundary? Well, a boundary is about identifying something that we want to control effectively. If you think about your national boundaries, they're things that we need to control at the moment, people coming in and people leaving. It's the same in your working from home environment. And creating boundaries is a great way to best manage distractions. So one of the things that we can all do is delineate our workspace. So by delineate, I mean, make it obvious to other people where we work and how important it is for people to respect that workplace. It's very frustrating when I come to my desk and find that the paperwork that I was working on the night before has been moved because I'm sharing that desk with somebody else. So one of the things that we know can work well is communicating to the people that you're sharing a home with the importance of respecting the area where you work and putting a boundary around it. It could well be hanging up a sign on a door to let people know when you're busy and can be contacted and can't be contacted. Another great way to create a boundary is letting people know when you can and can't be contacted. If you're like me and you deliver a lot of training, there are times during the day when I simply can't respond to emails because I'm working with clients. So why not let people know that? Put an out of office message on or communicate to your manager and your work colleagues times when you can and you cannot be contacted. This is a great conversation to have with others and can certainly help us better manage the challenge of being bombarded by text messages and other messages, emails, when we're actually trying to do our best work that requires focus. Another one that in Australia is very common is for people at the moment to be looking at social media more than they would normally. Why are they doing that? Well, most of us are very, very focused on what's happening nationally and what's happening globally with regard to the pandemic. And it is the case that the access to social media from research has gone up enormously. More people are looking at Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all the other platforms that we use. Now, of course, if we do this more than usual, it can be very, very draining and distracting. And one of the great things that we can all do is put a boundary around how often we do it. And a very simple technique that we could share with you here is log out of your social media platforms to make it harder for you to check them. I'm not suggesting you don't check them, but checking the news 4, 5, 10 times every hour could be very tiring over the course of a whole day. And it may well be something that you're doing more of at home than you were in the office, simply because you're at home. Finally, another suggestion that came from another group is thinking about turning your phone to flight mode when you finish work. Maybe for the first hour or 2 hours of the day. We're all very familiar with flight mode. For most of us on our devices, it's a swipe and a click. We do it when we fly. Why not do it when we finish work? It would certainly allow us to reconnect with our family members, our loved ones, and certainly prevent so many interruptions to our life outside of work. Now, these are just ideas. The concept of boundaries can take any form. I'm going to pause there and see if, Siva, you'd like to add anything from the chat that's coming in around this idea of boundaries and helping us unplug.
It's slightly different, Yen, maybe in Australia, people respect that time. Maybe Saturday, Sundays, people don't communicate, don't reach out. But generally in the Asian culture, people tend to be working, over the weekends, all right?
Yeah.
That becomes a bit difficult, right? But I like the idea, especially setting the boundaries. Sometimes you need to muscle the courage to tell the boss that, hey, you know, uh, don't disturb me. I was quite pleased, because tomorrow is a public holiday in Malaysia. It is May 1st. And my colleagues told me, "See, Mr. Shiva, tomorrow we are on public holiday. Do you remember that?" I said, "Okay."
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
great. Well, I like
you
that
should
concept,
respect that.
muscle
Yeah.
the courage. Yeah, certainly. Culturally, I think Australians work very hard too, and I think we do work at weekends and we do work outside of normal working hours. But culturally, we probably don't do that as much in Malaysia. But certainly, I think it is very tiring to feel like you're always working. And if you're already exhausted from working from home, it may well be that you might need to communicate to other people for your own well-being, to feel better, to be more productive. There may be times when you just need to switch off. So I think that's a good suggestion.
And I think
Yeah.
to a certain extent, if I may use this word, sometimes it might be necessary for you to, tell the boss, your superiors that, hey, I am working from this time to this time. And if you keep it slowly, it's a nice way of putting it. I really admire, some of them who can very nicely and say, hey, don't disturb me during this hour.
Yeah,
it's the way you communicate, and the message is sent to you across.
Yeah. If I'm doing an important piece of work, I really need to be focused, and actually answering emails, answering text messages can be very distracting. Fantastic. Now, just looking at some of the comments, I should have mentioned earlier, if you'd like to share your comment with everybody, there is an option for you to click all attendees and panelists. If you just want to share the comments with us, just click panelists. So if you want to really share your suggestions, click to everybody, and that will be really fantastic. So unplugging. Boundaries, two really good concepts to consider. Number two, relationships. Now, in the webinar that was run, I think last week, Siva, by Ben Palmer from Genos, he talked about the fundamental significance around our physical and mental well-being through connecting with others. It's fundamental to how we feel. It's one of the most well understood aspects of health and well-being. A predictor of how long we are going to live is likely to be our social networks. People who are lonely generally live shorter lives. And so at the moment, we've been thrust into an environment where these social networks have been broken. And so I would again suggest that you think about, am I connecting as much as I need to based on my needs for social connection? Now, I am personally someone who's slightly introverted, and I need less social interaction than other people I work with who are more extroverted. So one of the things I think we can do here is to consider, what is your own personal need for connection? Are you getting enough connection with your work colleagues and with your manager? And if not, there's a great opportunity to think about building that. And this is a really good way to manage loneliness, which can certainly be a big problem when working from home. Reaching out, as we describe it in Australia, I'm not sure if that's a Malaysian term, but we describe reaching out as taking the time to go and find people that we need to connect with, just to check in, to ask how they are. Maybe doing that once a week could be a really valuable way to stay connected with others. And building routine, establishing a weekly meeting with colleagues or like-minded people could be another really good way to keep us connected, and all the well-being activities that go with that. And these connections don't have to be work-related. In Australia, there's been a very, very big rise in people connecting just to have drinks, to have coffee, and to have lunch virtually, to replace what they would normally do in the workplace. So, Siva, I might hand over to you again. What are you noticing coming through with regard to relationships?
From Peggy, especially for leaders, it's very important that they implement a good work from home policy. That means the family and the companies also would have to sit together, the family and the organization, and the leaders also probably have to sit together and then chart out and discuss, what would be the right thing and stick to it.
Yeah, fantastic. So is it great communicating with each other about what the ways of working, we often call it in Australia? Yeah.
And also in Malaysia, it's a norm to accept, workmates to answer WhatsApp or text messages even late nights on weekends. So there is total no disconnection even after working hours. Yes.
So I think the key message that we're trying to convey here is that we all need to connect with others. It's fundamental to our well-being, but we have differing needs for it. And think about your own need, and are you getting as much connection as you need? And if not, then maybe some activities, some things you can do that could help you in this area. And I'm just looking at some of the comments here. You know, I look for opportunities to connect with colleagues to keep the channel open. That was from Anne-Marie. Thank you. That was a great comment.
Somebody has said spouse abuse has certainly increased.
Yeah, well, in Australia, there is also a lot of concern about loneliness and some of the other problems that can occur when people are isolated and working from home. Okay, let's talk about communication next. Now, Siva and I identified with you earlier that working virtually is more tiring. You need more stamina, and you definitely need to be really thinking very clearly about how am I going to communicate in a way that won't exhaust me and deplete me too much. And so one of the things that I think might be a great outcome of the current pandemic is to think about bringing focus to your conversations. I have noticed when I've been talking to clients and colleagues recently that you can tell when somebody's distracted on a meeting, that their focus shifts from you on the camera to something around them. It could be their email, it could be their telephone. And losing focus in a meeting can be really exhausting for everybody. People have to repeat messages. And so let's try and not be that person who in the middle of a meeting loses focus. I might be looking down and checking my email and then coming back. It's very apparent, and it's not a good habit. It's very, very draining. And so I think there's a great opportunity for us all to develop the discipline of being focused when we have virtual conversations. And one of the ways to do that is to remove distractions. So closing email, switching our phones off, so we're giving our undivided attention to the platform that we're working on. Equally, if we're talking to somebody on the phone, turn off the computer. Anything we can do to eliminate distractions could be a great way to improve the quality of our communication. In preparing for a virtual meeting, we might need to do more preparation because we can't look people in the eye and we can't read body language. We've got to be very clear about our messages. Talking very clearly to be understood is so important when we're working virtually. And also when we're listening to others, taking the time again to get really focused in on what we're hearing, checking understanding and asking questions are great skills to hone and develop. And finally, when it comes to communication, it may well be that we need more support from our manager than we might normally. Talking with our managers, and if indeed you are a manager, if you're managers yourself, talking to your team about what direction they might require. Are they receiving enough communication from you? Is the way that you're communicating working for them? Everybody will have different needs in this area. It isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. We definitely need to think about doing this on a person-by-person basis. And finally, setting up buddy calls with colleagues. You know, thinking about connecting with some of the people we may not have heard from for a few weeks could be a really important thing to do over the course of this pandemic. Okay, so let's go over to Siva again. What are you noticing coming through on the chat?
Some say that actually these distractions to some extent can be managed, you know. Yeah. And I agree with you, Ian, is that, you know, when you are on the conversation with them, it's good to not to multitask, but then sometimes there are so many things people tend to multitask and then you lose the concentration. Then you go back and then you would have to repeat that whole thing.
Yeah, and I think this is why, yeah, very tiring. I agree with you, Siva. I think if you have to repeat the message because someone lost focus, and that happens several times a day, very, very tiring. The research would say that we're very poor at multitasking whilst we think we can do it. I think the reality is if you were to look at your email now and try and listen to this webinar at the same time, you probably are going to struggle to follow exactly the thread of the conversation. Yeah, great comments I can see coming through. I'm going to keep my focus on facilitating and leave those for Siva to read. But I think we all have an opportunity. If there's an upside to this pandemic, it might be we all have a great opportunity at the moment to bring focus to our conversations, to really improve our communication. Think how great it's going to be when we're back in the office and we can start talking to people face to face. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, anything more, Siva, before I move on?
Yeah, there is another one. You know, managers will have to exercise great empathy about the significant, you know, aspect of balancing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Employees cannot be available all the time. Right.
No, they can't be available all the time. No, I think it's not healthy and it won't be sustainable. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because you know, at this point, you know, some of them are worried whether they will have a job and all those things. That also becomes very stressful for them.
Very stressful. Absolutely, very, very stressful. And yeah, absolutely. As I said at the start of the webinar, the way we feel will influence the way we communicate. Very important to be self-aware of the stress.
sorry, Ian, there's a good suggestion. Somebody says, when you have these webinar sessions, it should be preceded with the agenda and the expected outcome to avoid unnecessary comment and other thoughts.
Mm.
I think this is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good, great suggestion. Thank you for that.
Mm.
Okay, managing distractions. Now, I said earlier the working from home environment is full of distractions. I listed a few of them. It could be the people you share your home with. It could be the children that you may be trying to homeschool. It could be the noise of the apartment or the noise of the road outside. One of the most important things, though, is to think about boundaries. So how can I put a boundary around the distraction I'm trying to manage? Some distractions are harder to put boundaries around than others. So identify the ones you can control. There might be some, what we call in Australia, low-hanging fruit or easy wins, things you can do really quickly that can best manage that environment for you. And others may take a little bit more effort. But certainly there's an opportunity to identify the boundaries you can control and put steps in place to better manage them. The other concept I wanted to introduce in this webinar is intention. We talk a lot about mindfulness at the moment in Australia, and I'm sure that's the same in Malaysia. The skill of bringing focus to what we do. I think now during this working from home time, we can all be very intentional, more so than usual, about everything we do to maintain our focus and energy to our tasks. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you're writing an email, try and avoid the temptation to be distracted. Try to get to the end of the email without moving to another task or without picking up our phone. Now, I'm making that sound very easy. In reality, it's very, very hard. But of course, the more often we practice it, the better we get. And so when you come to have an important conversation with a client, you've already started to develop the skill around bringing focus to what you do. And I think being intentional is just a fantastic skill that we can use at the moment. Certainly if you're talking to a colleague and you make good eye contact throughout the entire conversation, you're listening closely, you're being very focused, you're definitely going to get better outcomes than if you're feeling the temptation to shift your focus during the time of that conversation. Another great tip to manage distractions is be really focused around what you want to achieve. A webinar like this for me is an obvious focus because it's happening and it's live, but you might well want to write down the things each day that are really important for you to achieve. That could be doing some exercise. It could be making some important phone calls. It could be communicating with a client. It could be talking to your colleagues, whatever it might be. Writing these things down and holding them in your focus throughout the day could be a really good way for you to manage the distractions that can often derail the important things we need to get done. Another distraction that we can manage, simply, I've mentioned it already, is logging out of social media. And finally, and this is something that Siva mentioned earlier, task switching is exhausting. Working from home is exhausting. If you are finding that you're losing focus through distractions, don't be surprised if you're finding a cognitive depletion. So that's a very technical term to say, I'm just getting tired. I'm finding switching, looking at email a lot, looking at news a lot is actually not helping me. It's really exhausting me. I'm feeling more tired now than I did when I was working in the office. So, Siva, absolutely back over to you. What about distractions?
Sure. So one important thing here is that, the multitasking definitely does not help, you are actually creating more issues to others than what you think you'll be achieving, right? And there's another good comment from Hua, I think. It says that working from home under normal circumstances and during the lockdown is very different, because she says that I worked from home and it wasn't as exhausting and I was actually very productive. But this is because the kids because the kids were at school and etc. Spouse were away at work, and you don't need to manage the meals throughout the day. Yeah. But chaos is only in the morning and once everybody is back home, but now it's lots of work and it's almost chaotic every day.
Yeah. I've just seen a comment from Anne-Marie here saying task switching, multitasking actually doesn't help. I would agree with you, Anne-Marie, and so would the scientists. They say that the brain doesn't cope well with switching between tasks. We think we're really good at it, but in reality, it does nothing other than make us feel more exhausted. But the challenge is staying focused, and I'm making it sound easy. It really isn't. If anyone's practiced mindfulness, and I know that in Malaysia, I'm sure people do practice mindfulness, it takes a long time to get skilled at bringing focus. But we've got to start somewhere, and this is a great opportunity, I think. Siva, what else are you noticing?
One more question that has come from Judas. I was asked by one of my colleagues if they are really adding value given that they are working from home. This kind this kind of surprised me as it came out to be a strong source of anxiety. How do we overcome this sense of anxiety?
Yeah. So what was the, if I could just recap with you, what was the question there around anxiety, just to recap?
Yeah, that means, I was asked, I'm just reading that again.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was asked by one of my colleagues if they are really adding value given that they're working from home. This is something that's surprising, and it came out to be a strong source of anxiety. How do we
Yeah,
overcome
absolutely.
this?
I think, I think what we're identifying in Australia is that people are not achieving as much as they would if they're in the office, but they need to accept that that's okay. I think we set a very high bar for ourselves. I think working from home, particularly if you're looking after kids, you can't get as much achieved, but we push ourselves so hard that our expectations are so high. I think we just need to be a little bit kinder to ourselves and have conversations with our manager about what's realistic. You used the phrase earlier, muscle the courage. I like that. You've really got to, I think, have these important conversations, because it is a very, very challenging environment, and one in which, certainly in Australia, we're probably going to be in for several weeks, if not months to come. Okay, so let's look at
one last good comment. Just wanted to add that, from Peggy. It says the other it's about the values line, that you need to have with working from home is the awareness of responsibility and deliverance of the result. Therefore, the objective would be to have clear and achievable through this method, and then the task will become more doable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think managers need to have trust in people as well. Good staff will work hard. They'll get the job done. They don't need necessarily us to manage them as tightly as we would in an office environment. Empower people, let them make good choices, and I think they will thrive in that type of environment, which is very much the theme of this webinar. Certainly, I know my boss, Ben Palmer. It's just wonderful. He'll check in with me once a day, but he's got trust in me doing what I need to do, and I'll do it in the way that best meets the needs of me and my family. That level of trust is a great thing to have. It makes you feel really confident that your manager trusts that you'll work as productively as you can. Okay, someone else has put here, it takes time to adapt to working from home. This is the new norm. That's why we're listening now. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, hopefully some of the tips we're offering are helpful. Okay, staying motivated. I think many of us over the last few weeks have naturally been motivated because we've been thrust into this environment so quickly. But it is possible that over the next few weeks and months, our motivation might dip slightly. I think that's just about being human. And so one of the great opportunities that we've got at the moment is to build new routines. Now, we're all creatures of habit, and we have had routines that we've used for years, and suddenly they've all been disrupted. But let's look at this as an opportunity. We've got a chance now to build a new routine. What does that new routine look like for you? Have you sat down and thought about what might be some of the things that I can do differently now that I'm working from home? So in Australia, many people are now recognizing that because they're not commuting or traveling to work, they've got more time, and they can use that time for things they've always wanted to do, like exercise. Maybe it's to do some mindfulness or some yoga. So have a think about what your new routine might look like. The other thing, of course, is that the routine is only as good as the one you can stick to. So your routine is something you need to develop. Someone can't give you a routine. You have the opportunity to shape and mold the routine to best suit your needs. And that could be something like when you take breaks, when you exercise, when you make phone calls, when you check email. This is just a fantastic opportunity to shape your working from home environment just how you want it to be. The other thing that in Australia we're very conscious of is people not taking breaks, working for long periods of time without getting up from their desk. Very unhealthy. We know that physical activity is a great way to stimulate the brain. And so in your routine, I think we should all look at taking proper breaks and what I call micro breaks. So when you've achieved an important task like writing an email or making a phone call, and you're at home, reward yourself with an activity like a household chore, like unpacking the dishwasher or preparing some food. It might only take you 5 minutes, but it's a great way to build movement into your day and to avoid the problems associated with long periods sitting at your computer. Another one in Australia that we're focusing on a lot is the ergonomics, as we call it. Is your workspace that you've created for you in your home adequate? If not, talk to your company about what you might need to improve it. So what I'm talking here is about your computer, your desk, your chair, something that will give you good posture and avoid you being slumped, something that's going to help you keep energized throughout the period of the day. There's lots of advice we can seek around this, but certainly movement is one important thing, standing, but certainly thinking about your workspace, very important to keep motivated. Building activity, I've mentioned this already. Anything you do is better than nothing. And there's a multitude of great apps that you can download where you can build some exercise into your day. Regardless of your physical limitations, there's things that we can do. And finally, and quite interestingly, another way to keep motivated is to be a positive influence to other people. There's a lot of research to say that giving, and this is a very big thing in Australia at the moment, giving back to the community, assisting older people, communicating with people that may need help, is not only good for the people that we reach out to support, but very, very helpful for our own well-being. And whether you're a leader or not, we all have the wonderful opportunity to be a positive influence on other people. So once again, I'd love to hand over to Siva. I've been talking for a while. What are you noticing coming through around other things that people are doing to stay motivated?
I think another way is also, Ben, find a little space in between to give a call, talk to somebody whom you have not had a chat for a long time and just check out and see how are they doing. Yeah. It could be a call to your colleague and all those things. Sometimes that takes you away from the routine and helps you to feel good because it's nice to catch up sometimes.
Yeah, and acts of kindness are really beneficial for us and other people. It's a great outcome we're seeing globally. People giving generously at the moment, I would say.
And yeah, I can.
Great comment from Jude there about working from home experience seems to be bringing back some of the core values we've always spoken about. I couldn't agree more. As a family, we've sat down and talked about what are some of the great things that are happening at the moment. We're talking more, we're sharing more, we're talking about some of our great experiences. We're relishing the opportunity to get back outside more so than ever. Just simple things that we may have taken for granted. Siva, what are you seeing?
Yeah, and it's also sometimes to take the little break and do some little household chores that you have been planning to do. Yeah. And I think that helps.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with getting up from your desk and spending 5 minutes doing a job around the house. It's the same as getting up in the office and making yourself a drink. It's a great opportunity to break your day, to put some movement into your day and keep yourself energized.
Yeah. And the other thing is about congratulating your teams, tracking their results and deliverables and congratulating the team on the achievement on a regular basis, can certainly help motivating everyone.
Certainly, we call that rewarded recognition in Australia, but when you get that call from somebody and they say thank you and they explain why they're so appreciative, it makes a massive difference.
Yeah, and that somebody who says that I get up in the morning and looking forward to have the Zoom meeting and getting connected with everyone.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and build routine. It's a routine. Let's try and think about how often do we need to do that? What's a good time of the day to do that suits everybody? I think one of the things I found exhausting is meetings that are being given to me at very short notice. You can't plan your day. You're just suddenly told, here's a meeting. It's very disruptive. Having a plan, having a routine, really, really useful. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, well, let's keep moving. So I spoke earlier about the fact that we're really wanting you to have a look at trying some different things during the course of this webinar. But one of the things we also know is what might work for me and what might work for Siva and might work for you could be very different. So I think it's important to evaluate whether they're working or not, because some things you try will work and some things won't. So there's a very easy way of doing this. Step one is to pause and check in with yourself regularly when you're working from home and identify the way you're feeling. So if at lunchtime you want to check in with yourself and you're feeling as if you're not at your best, there's a great opportunity to think about what might be some of the reasons why my day hasn't been as productive as I wanted it to be. What have been the triggers of those emotions? Has it been lack of routine? Has it been the noise that my children are making? Has it been I've not been prepared or I've lost focus on something? So pausing is number one. It's a great skill to be. Self-awareness is about checking in with yourself and recognizing how you feel. But the second part of that is, what are the triggers? What's caused me to feel the way I feel? Equally, if you've had a really productive day, why was that? What were the things that you did that worked so well that you could replicate again tomorrow? And finally, actively seek and pursue the things that generate positive emotions for you. Personally, for me, exercising, and in Australia we are allowed to go out and exercise in small groups of two or fewer. Well, going out and going for a long walk is very, very beneficial for me. It allows me to plan my day. It involves me getting my heart rate up. I really feel energized afterwards. And so actively making sure that every day involves some activity, very, very beneficial. But for you, it could be reading. For you, it could be sitting with a family member and enjoying breakfast or lunch. It doesn't matter what it is. It's whatever works for you. Step 2, experiment with new ways of working. We're all creatures of habit. We all do similar things. We have done for years. I think this is a unique opportunity to try new things. I like to use the analogy of a rubber band. Stretch that band into different dimensions. See what we can do differently. It will always come back to rest. But if you stretch it enough, you might find that you've developed new habits and new ways of working. And the goal really is to identify what working from home activities is best for you. As I said earlier, what works for me might not work for you. What works for you might not work for me. Trial and error and experiment and see if there's some things that are really beneficial for you. Step 3, practice being present in everything that you do. So if you choose a new activity, walking, for example, try and bring mindfulness to it. Focus on what it's like to be outside, listening to the birds, looking at the sky, recognizing that your heart rate is lifting. All of those things we can bring presence to. When you're emailing, bring presence to the email. When we're communicating, bring presence to the conversation. Great skill to develop. Search for opportunities to cultivate this focus. There might be some simple things you do every day that you do relatively mindlessly. Let's try and do them with focus. And that will then help us with our other tasks. And I think finally, accept that losing focus is all part of the process. Don't be too hard on yourself. If you find you are getting distracted, you're just being human. We all do it. And I think there's an opportunity here to just be a little bit kinder, recognize that not everything is going to work the way we expect. And therefore we should just keep practicing and we'll get there eventually. So, Siva, finally, what are you noticing coming through before I start to bring the webinar to a close?
And you see, these are some great ideas, But I like the suggestion, Ben, is that, you need to go easy on yourself because for many of them, there could be a lot of challenges. And
Yeah.
and I think the last 40 over days, there's been tremendous learning for everybody, right? Including myself, we are getting on to learn new things and a lot of, great opportunities also. Yeah. So, so there's going to be a lot of learning here, and working from home strategies, it is going to be very different from individuals, right? Yeah. Let me share something just quite a little humorous, but, yesterday I was having a conference call with one of my colleagues and he has got a little baby and then the baby always comes in, so we have to be mindful. And suddenly I found him, he's gone off and he was there again back. And this time he was sitting in the car. Right. And then the alarm goes off. Then I say, what is the alarm? He said, no, I need to put on the seatbelt to get the alarm off.
Right. Oh, very funny.
I was just putting myself in, his shoes, and you need to have that empathy, to what extent people really go on to stay on the conversation and to, to give you that, the undivided attention to you, that was really admirable.
Yeah, absolutely. Very resourceful as well. I've got a daughter who's 18 in her last year of school. She's very independent with her studies, but I've got my colleague, Ben, who you may have listened to on the webinar that he ran last week. He's got 3 kids under 10. Very different environment that he's working in to the one I'm working in. So being understanding and empathetic and recognizing we're all in very different situations. And I'm sure some of you are caring for older parents right now, which is another concern again. So let's be a little bit kind to ourselves, but actually let's look at this as an opportunity, as Siva said, to really stretch ourselves and develop some great new skills. So finally, let's run a poll. I'd like to know which of the strategies you think you're going to use. So let's run that poll and let's just see what results come out. So I'm going to open that up now. Which of the strategies that I've spoken about over the last 50 minutes do you think you're going to use? It's multiple choice. You can vote for as many as you like, and let's see which come out on top. Hopefully you can see that poll. Here we go. Great. The votes are coming in. So we've got 10% of you have voted already. Once again, you won't be able to find this on the internet. This is very much Malaysian specific, point in time, relevant feedback. Half of you have voted. Thank you. That's very fast. I'll share the results in a minute or two, just when we get all the results in.
So we have got close to about 290 attendees on this session.
Wonderful. Thank you. I can see. Yeah, that's great. And over 75% of that 290 have voted. So we really are getting some great input from you, and we really do value that. Certainly, we've obviously kept your focus because you're still with us at the end of the webinar, which is great. So I'll just leave that for another 30 seconds. I can see, keep the chat going. It's great to share ideas. We can't read them all out, but I'm reading them and I can see it's really wonderful that you're posting suggestions to your colleagues. So thank you very much for that. Okay, I'm going to close that poll and I'm going to share the results. Sibra, if you could can you see those results?
Right, and 64% is managing distractions.
Yeah. Closely followed by keeping ourselves motivated, absolutely.
Setting boundaries.
Yeah. And I just wonder whether the relationships is lower because we are sharing our homes with other people. It could well be the reason. But let's not forget that some people aren't. Some people might be on their own, and these might be the people we can reach out to.
Yeah. So that is an interesting poll that we have about 223 persons who have, got into this poll.
Yeah, very useful. So, what we're seeing here, managing my distractions, keeping myself motivated, using boundaries as a way to manage distractions could be really helpful. And then finally, and not insignificantly, making sure I still maintain good relations with others around me. Okay.
Ben, I have a question. You did this similar session in Australia,
Yes.
So what was it like?
Very similar, very, very similar. What Ben and I have been quite interested to find is the buffer research talks about loneliness, and yet loneliness has come out quite low in our research too. But we believe it's because a lot of people are sharing their homes with children and partners and parents. That's not everybody, of course, so we've got to be careful not to assume that there's no one lonely out there. That could well not be the case. But yeah, the big one in Australia, Siva, unplugging. Unplugging, maybe because we don't work as such long hours as you do in Malaysia, and people are at the moment, and they're really struggling, particularly teachers struggling to disconnect, feeling like they're constantly talking to students, to pupils and colleagues. But yeah, very, very, very similar, absolutely very similar. Okay, so finally, just before we close the webinar, I've got one more minute left. Take a moment to set an intention for how you will best manage your working from home environment, and maybe share those ideas in the chat box just for us to bring everything to a conclusion. So what are you going to do differently? What might we see you do differently tomorrow based on the webinar today? If you've got any ideas, got any suggestions, if you've got something that's very front of mind, share it with us over the next 30 seconds. We'll read a few of them out, and then I'll formally bring the webinar to a close. Okay, so putting focus on everything we do, that's great to hear. Planning ahead. Yeah, the priority matrix. I think Jude might be talking about Stephen Covey's important, urgent, possibly. I actually think that's a really great matrix. If that's the one, what a great matrix to use at the moment. Perhaps you could let me know if that's the one you're thinking of.
Managing distractions, mindfulness.
Yeah. Setting up a do not enter sign. Wonderful. Simple but highly practical. Love that idea. Start a daily diary. What a great thing to go back to in years to come. Talking about the experience of working from home. Managing empathy with your other half. Wonderful. Okay. Yeah.
Start a diary as well. Somebody would say.
Yeah. What a great idea. Would be a great time capsule. A great record. Planning priorities, communicating those with family, keeping in touch with colleagues. Okay, daily checklist, great. Okay, that was a simple one we offered earlier. Hopefully, stop multitasking, get task focused. That's a really good one too.
Discipline.
Yeah.
Motivate.
Okay. So in summary, enhancing our productivity when working from home. Let's try and intentionally engage in activities that make us feel good. So what are they? Identify what they are through that 3-step guide. What's making me feel positive? And try and do as many of those as possible. And the way we do that is identify the triggers of when we feel good and when we feel bad, productive and unproductive emotions. That's about being self-aware. And that's why I talked about self-awareness at the outset of this webinar. Experiment and be brave with different ways of working, and try and bring focus, try and be present in everything we do. It will help us enormously. And finally, accept that some of the approaches that we take will work and some won't work. But experimenting is part of the process, part of the fun. I thank you very much for letting me come into your lives and talk to you for an hour this afternoon. I also am very grateful to partner with Siva and the Malaysian Institute of Management for this webinar. A recording will be made. It won't include the chat, but it will include slides and us commentating. And, you know, like everyone in Australia, we're in this together. I really wish the best for you. I hope we come out of this stronger and better. And I also hope to connect with you in the short to medium term. Thank you very much. And I'll talk to you soon.
Right. And thank you, Ben. Thank you for coming on board. And this is excellent. And I want to thank all our MIM members, partners, and all those who have joined today's session. Thank you very much. And we hope that this was very useful for you. I just want to remind you that you can just go on into our MIM Insights, and you will have Ben again. Sorry, you will have Ian again coming back.
Oh, that's right. Yes, next week.
It's Ian and Ben. Okay, so Ian will be sharing next week on 7th of May. Ian will be sharing with you how to manage your teams remotely. And after that, the following week on 14th May, we have another session. This is where Dr. Ben Palmer will be coming in again. We are bringing back this program because of, you know, there have been a lot of requests. We had more than 500 people on that session. It's about managing your psychological well-being. So they are very much interrelated. So I look forward to seeing you again next week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and tell your boss tomorrow is a holiday, right?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just reading the lovely comments that are coming through. You've made my evening. I will go and reconnect with my family with a smile on my face, looking at all the great feedback coming through. And I'm very, very pleased I've made a positive difference over the last 60 minutes. So thank you, Siva. Thank you, everybody. I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll bring that webinar to a close now. Thanks very much, and hopefully connect with some of you next week.